Hello viewers, today for the initial checkout we have a Uniden cordless telephone. This is the model XC645C. This is very similar to the model that I grew up with. My first cordless telephone was the model XCA 650, which is more or less the same thing as this, but with an answering machine instead of the dial pad on the base. The XCA 650 also had speakerphone on the base, but there was no way to dial out. I don't know if the XCA 650 would have also come with the charging cradle. I think the C in the model number indicates that it came with the charging cradle, but I'm not certain. These model numbers are very cryptic, and most of the digits do stand for something. Like we know that XC is no answering machine, but XCA had the A for the answering machine. We're starting to decode a lot of them. The H, or the letter H, has done a fair bit of work on decoding these model numbers, and I have a thing on the computer that talks about them. Anyways, so this one is in the box. It's in pretty good condition in the box too. These are becoming very rare, very difficult to find. I don't know what it is with this particular series. I don't know if it didn't sell very often or what, but they're becoming extremely difficult to find. The only one that seems to show up from time to time is I believe it's the XC610, which is this handset with a very basic base, almost like a trim line kind of thing, where there's no speakerphone or answering machine. It's like it's just the charging portion and that's it. That one shows up on occasion, but the XCA 650, this one, there was another version of this that had caller ID on the back. That one's kind of unusual. It's just a very uncommon series, and I don't know why, because there are other Uniden 46 to 49 megahertz models that are even older that are still around. And I know these last a long time because the one that I had was used for close to 2 decades and it never had an issue. So I'm not sure why these are so hard to find, but they are. The box is in pretty decent condition. There's a little bit of, looks like some kind of liquid damage here on this side. A little dusty on the top, but it's not bad for the age. These are a product of the mid to late 90s, somewhere in that range. And so they're getting pretty old. I don't think people realize that these telephones are starting to become 20 to 25 years old. Even the 900 megahertz ones, like the XCA or EXAI 7980, which is one of the ones I use quite often. Those telephones are pushing 25 years old at this point, and it's amazing how many of them are still in service. I'm not sure why the box is bulging like this. It's not really correct. It's missing a lot of the packaging materials. It's missing the instruction manual, which is unfortunate. But it is all there, and it's surprisingly not that yellowed. It's a little dirty. Still got the thing on there. We got the power cord. We have a handset cord, which has nothing to do with this. We have a sticky cord, which was probably the original, but I have no use for sticky cords. I have hundreds of non-sticky cords. We have an old AT&T unopened line cord, which is pretty cool. But that also, I don't think, has anything to do with this. We have a non-broken 2-line splitter, so they, or not 2-line, 2-outlet duplicator. They probably had this phone connected in conjunction with some kind of a corded telephone. And then we have the charging cradle. Really wish we had the instruction manual, but at least that can be reprinted. All the original documentation cannot be reprinted, the quick start guide and so forth, but I can reprint the instruction manual, so at least I'll know how to use it. Okay, so let's see what we have here. I don't know if these adapters are different. They look to be pretty much the same physically, and it would appear as though they are the same. The model number is the AD-310. They input 120 volts AC at 4 watts, and they output the DC, or the direct to the current, at 9 volts with a milliamp rating of 210. Unfortunately, they were made in China, and I don't know if they're going to still work or not. The single element of Uniden phones that I have seen fail with some degree of consistency is the power cords and the receiver capsules. Fortunately, both of those things are pretty easy to replace. Here's a closer look at the base. We have the speakerphone. These are all Extendaphone branded. I don't know what that is. There's like some thread or something in the hook switch there. Here's the informations. Now, oddly enough, this was made in the Philippines, and I'm pretty sure that the handset is also made in the Philippines. Certainly is. So why they decided to ship the adapters in from China is beyond me. Because they really didn't cut corners. They were not cutting corners at this time, really at all. Here's the physical switches. We have a setting for the ring volume, pulse tone, DC input, and the telephone line. And on the side we have the slider for the volume control. And all these buttons are the rubber dome type buttons. They're not the clicky kind, which I was not expecting, because on the XCA 650 they are the clicking kind. I think this has kind of a nicer feel to it. Here is the charging cradle. The model number is the CRX 710, and it too was made in the Philippines. There's the AC input at the 9 volts with the positive in the center. It's a very standard size and voltage. It's pretty easy to replace. This doesn't really appear like it's seen a lot of use. You see a couple of marks down there where the charging cradles are, but I don't think this was used all that often. I mean, these had a long battery life. The I believe the battery life was 14 days of standby and 7 hours of talk time on a 24-hour charge. I can't imagine why you would be talking that much to run out the battery. I mean, I talk on the phone maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, and then I charge it up at night, and it's never runs out. I find it hard to believe that people really talked on the phone 7 hours every single day and needed to get it back on the cradle immediately. I just don't think that that was really a necessary component. Here's the handset itself. The antenna is cracking. But it's breaking in such a way that I can probably glue it and it won't look bad at all. Unfortunately, these antennas were made out of a material that has become brittle over time, and so a lot of times these will break even if they just get flexed a little bit. They'll just snap. They're still flexible, but instead of flexing and then going back to their original shape, they just flex and then crack. There's a metal spring type antenna inside of there. A little bit of dirt on the handset, nothing too major. All the buttons still feel pretty good, they're not even sticky. It looks like it's mostly just surface dirt on this thing. It's possible we can get away with just cleaning it from the outside. Although I may have to take the antenna apart to re-glue it. Looks like a pretty low hours unit. I don't see much wear on the thing at all. Here's what I suspect is the original battery. This does not appear to have a date code, which is odd, because conventionally these do have a date code. Perhaps it's a replacement. It's of the original specification, which is the 3.6 volts, the DC, and the 270 the milliamps. It is the nickel, the cadmium chemistry. Of course, it's rechargeable. It's made in Indonesia, manufactured by Sanyo, which is kind of unusual. Usually these are made by GPI, BYD, in later years the Koran or the Korwak. So maybe this isn't the original battery. Now, you know what? I'm gonna say it's not the original battery. It's of correct specification, but I don't think this is the original battery. And the only thing I really didn't like about these phones was the way the battery connected. It's very difficult to plug and unplug the battery. Well, let's see if this takes a charge. If it's the original battery, it'll probably take a charge. Okay, so let's get everything plugged in here. I'll plug in the power cord. And in theory, you're supposed to route it around there for security so it doesn't come out. Okay, I heard the speaker initialize. And it's taking in exactly 4 watts as it claimed it would. And the battery is not taking a charge. As you can see, the charge indicator is off. Now I think I have an original battery to one of these somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. I located a battery. This is one of the original batteries that would have shipped with these phones at the time. You can see the date code down there at the right. The left 2 digits are the last 2 digits of the year, so this would be 1998. And the digits on the right are the month. So that would make July of 1998. And there it is, manufactured by the GPI. And even though these batteries was made in China, they were exceptional quality batteries, and it's not unusual for these to take a charge and work completely fine over 2 decades later. I'd be willing to bet that this one will take a charge if we plug it in here. I'm not sure it'll supply 7 hours of talking time anymore, but look at that, it's taking a charge. So these were exceptional quality batteries. This is a replacement. It's kind of unusual that I find replacements in these Uniden phones, because the batteries, they lasted for a long time. I used, in my 650, I used the original battery up until the day I took it out of regular service, and that was like in the mid 2010s. So that battery was approaching 2 decades old, and it worked fine. I never had that phone run out of charge on me, and I used to talk on that a lot. That was my only cordless phone for a long time. Look at that. Battery from 1998 is still taking a charge. Unbelievable. Oh, the touch tone sound is different on this than on the 650. Alright, let's get this charging cradle plugged in here and see if it works. It would appear to work. We have the indicator there, and we have the indicator on the back of the handset. Now I suspect when we connect it to here we won't see this flicker, as it's not going to be resetting the code. Meanwhile, if you put it into the base, you'll see it flicker as it resets the security code. There it goes, it just reset the security code. Okay, so we're going to go through the video with that battery from 1998 just to prove a point. So I'm going to let this charge up for a while, and then we'll pick back up on the video. It's been charging for about an hour now. I just came back into the studio to finish the video, and I was greeted by this rather concerning electrical sound. And it's coming from one of the transformers. It's coming from that one. So what's happening there is there's a component in there which is made of metal plates stacked on top of each other, and then the winding goes around them. And what's happened is one of the plates has come loose. The varnish has broke down over the years, and the plates are no longer being held together properly. If you could cut this open very carefully and revarnish the winding, this would stop. You could fix that. But there's really no way to fix it externally. So that's kind of unfortunate, but you know, in this case, let's see, I would suspect that's the adapter going to the base. Oh, it's not, it's the adapter going to the cradle, so it's not even under any load. Wonder what would happen if we plug it into the base. Doesn't seem to be any change in the sound. Well, we're certainly not going to listen to that through the entire video, so I'll just disconnect it and I'll reconnect it briefly when I'm checking out the cradle. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier in the video, one of the very few failure points of Uniden telephones does seem to be the AC adapters, and it looks like we're going to have one here as well. Now bear in mind that adapter has been in service for, well, I don't know if it's been in service for that long, but the adapter is over 2 decades old. so it's not like it's breaking down prematurely. Anyways, so let's go ahead and start using this telephone and see what we have here. The battery is working fine. So we have talk and flash or redial. So when you've never typed any buttons, it would be redial, or if you're getting an incoming call, it would function as flash. Now the 650 would replace this button with the remote answering machine button, and then there would be labels in between the numerics for the controls on the answering machine. This one has the ringer tone and ringer volume adjustments as two separate buttons. This would serve as the volume button while you're on a call, and then the pause would be for dialing numbers. You hit that for probably a 2 or 4 second pause in between the dialing, and it probably has it has 20 memories, so probably all of this and then 1 plus the rest of them would be my guess. Okay, so let's see what the ring sounds like. Typical ringer on most Uniden phones. Okay. You know, if there's any way to turn the ringer off. Let's get the phone line plugged in and we'll call it up. And we'll hear what the bass ring sounds like. Ah, jeez. Okay. Huh, I think that's a different ringer than the 650 has. Should have auto talk. Yep, there it goes, it's already connected. And it hung up as well. So apparently this may not be as similar to the 650 as I thought, as far as the internals are concerned. Seems like it's a completely different board, which I guess would make sense. An answering machine versus a non-answering machine is a pretty significantly different board. Okay, so that was the clatter tone. We'll change it to the flicker. There is typically on these phones a delay between the time that the base unit rings and then the time that the handset rings, and I remember that very distinctly back in the day when I was using the 650. And there you go, just heard it. Okay, let's go to the mains and we'll make some outside calls here so we can see what it sounds like. And there's our tripod kick for the video. Sounds like the receiver cap is okay on this one. Oh no, actually it's a little bit on the quiet side. Yeah, I'm going to say the receiver cap needs to be replaced on this. It's audible, but it's not as loud as it should be.
2021. First, thank you for helping us make a successful our family.
It's very clear though, and I remember that about the 650 as well. It was surprisingly clear. A lot of these 46 to 49 megahertz phones didn't work that well, and they always had static in them. And I remember this one, or not this one, but the 650, I would use it outside. I would take it to the neighbor's house, and it always had a pretty good reception. You would get static bits here and there when you moved through certain places, but generally speaking, it was very clear. Okay, so let's take a look at the speakerphone now. That's all the way up. That's all the way down. Buttons are very responsive.
Hello, Farmer Jones, here with the Christmas crop
That's
line
all the way up.
update for this last full week of 2021. First, thank you for helping us make a successful 74th season
There's the
of
mute.
Christmas trees. And from our
How
family,
duplex is this
a
speakerphone?
passionate wish that all of you
It
have
seems to be
peace
pretty well duplex.
for the holidays and all
It does
through.
cut out slightly when I speak near it, but it comes right back
Now,
immediately.
although the tree season is over, we do have some wine opportunities, and we are
Lower this
open
down.
this last week.
That's about
of
halfway.
December, for wine at mainly bottle sales.
All the way
on,
down.
Tuesday the 28th, Wednesday the 29th,
It's got a pretty good range to it.
Thursday the 30th, from 12 noon to 5 p.m. You can enjoy a few complimentary tastes of wine and a glass outside by the bonfire, and also mulled wine as well. There is no indoor seating or tastings.
It's not terrible, but it's not really anything to write home about either. Alright, let me call, I'll call myself and then I'll talk into it in the other room so you can hear what it sounds like.
A feedback freak show. Okay, I am in the other room now, and this is a live speakerphone quality, sound quality example of me speaking into the telephone. The speakerphone is clear, but I think it sounds a bit hollow. It's not quite as lifelike as some of the other speakerphones that I've used. Okay, that'll conclude this test. Over and out before we get a feedback freak show.
Okay, so I guess now we can record some testing messages and we'll see how the pickup is on both the cordless handset and the base speakerphone.
4 new messages and 4 old messages. Message 1.
It's been a while since I've talked on one of these handsets. I forgot how nice the ergonomics are compared to the newer telephones. The earpiece on this thing is fantastic. It's just like the old 2500 and 2554 handsets, where it cups your ear and funnels all the sound from the phone in, but blocks out any of the background noise from the surrounding environment. Really excellent. So I'm moving across the room now. Heard a couple bits of static there. It's pretty clear now. And I am all the way across the room at this point, and it's still pretty clear. So this one's performing the same way that I remember the 650 performing. It did have its moments where you get little blips of static here and there, but generally speaking, it has pretty good coverage. It certainly has, I'd say, better coverage than even some newer phones. I just walked through a little bit of static there, but there is other models, other 5.8 gigahertz models that were released 10 years after this one that did not seem to have as good a coverage as this one did. The other thing I remember about this phone was that the outgoing modulation seemed to always be kind of low, and it's like that on most of the 900 megahertz full-size handsets as well, which is really the only thing I can think of about these phones that I don't particularly like. Otherwise, they really have excellent sound quality. Towards the, I guess it was within the time that I was using this, the XCA 650 telephone. We also had in the house a VTech telephone. It was the VTech model 5881. And I never particularly liked that telephone back in the day. Now I really like it for a number of different reasons, but at the time I didn't particularly like it, and I always would go out of my way to use the XCA 650 that I had in the bedroom, regardless of where it was in the house at the time. And I always found that it had much better range than the 5881. I would use the thing outside all the time. I actually have some photographs on my computer, I guess my mother would have taken them, of me using the XCA 650 out in the yard. And we also had, off the property, but not that far down, we had a couple of culverts that I was always interested in. And I would often take the phone down and look at the culverts, and the phone would get a reception down there. Meanwhile, the 5881 would not even have any coverage that far off the property. So, anyways, that'll conclude this testing message and a little bit of recollection of some good times with the XCA 650. Alright, I will change the channel a couple times so we can hear what that sounds like. Okay, the channel has been changed. I'll change it one more time. And now I will hang up the telephone using the talk button.
Message 2.
This time I will hang up into the base.
Message 3.
And this time I will hang up into the charging cradle. I just plugged it back in and the transformer is quiet again, so it must not have its issue until it heats up.
Message 4.
And now we are testing the speaking phone. Right now the telephone is sitting on the carpet, and I'm talking it about a foot away from the telephone. I'm going to put it onto a hard surface now. I'll use a piece of cardboard. Okay, now I'm speaking into the telephone at about the same distance and volume, except now the telephone is sitting on a hard surface. I have found that it does make a difference in the sound in regards to what surface the telephone sits on, but I have not noticed much of a difference in the amount of sound it picks up. And in fact, kind of oddly, I tend to prefer the sound of the pickup with it on the carpet, which of course is probably not how anybody uses it. Now I've turned the phone over and I'm speaking very close into the microphone. Let's make a notation here that there is no fake microphone label on the top of the unit. Okay, it's back down the table now. I'm going to start moving away from the telephone. I don't remember how good the speakerphone was on the XCA 650. I really don't recall ever using it that much. I would always talk on the cordless handset. Okay, so I'm going to start moving back away from the telephone now. I'm at about 2 feet away from the telephone now, and I'm speaking at a very moderate volume, probably a little bit below what most people would use a conversation volume. Okay, now I'm about 3 feet away from the telephone, 4 feet away from the telephone, and this area here, like 4 to 5 feet away, this is as far as I would expect it to work. If it works here, I would say it's a good speakerphone. I don't think it really has to work that well much beyond this. If it does, that's fantastic, but in a realistic use case, you know, you're not going to shout across the room with your telephone. That's kind of ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. Okay, now I'm about 5 feet away from the telephone. 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet, 11 feet. This is all the way across the room. Phone, and the printer machine cut off yet, so pickup must be pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to check the mute, so I'm going to press it, and then I can look and see if it's out and out and the thing is working correctly. Okay, it's time to hang up and conclude this message.
End of messages.
Okay, so that was interesting. The speakerphone sounds a lot better than I thought it would. I think the speakerphone has a much more lifelike pickup to it than the handset does. Okay, so we're just about done here. I'm just kind of curious if it'll page when it's on the handset. I mean, when it's on the charging cradle. And it will. That's not very long. It's certainly not long enough to really find the telephone. It's also worth noting that the battery from 1998 has lasted through the entire video with no problem. I don't usually keep old batteries. I used to, and then I kind of stopped because it didn't make any sense, because you can't really preserve them. I mean, eventually they're going to leak or corrode or something. But I think I'll keep this one because it seems like it's working just fine, and I'll cancel out that replacement one because it's not of any use to me. Okay, that's it for the Uniden XCA 645C cordless speakerphone with dual keypad.